very benefits that have helped bring child poverty down previously.
Victims of the Boston Marathon bombings have condemned the man responsible after he apologised for the attack. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, who was formally sentenced to death yesterday, said he was sorry for the suffering he'd caused. 3 people died and more than 260 were injured in the attack in 2013. And James Corden will be awarded an OBE by the Princess Royal later for services to drama at Buckingham Palace. The ceremony will also see former Lib Dem leader Lord Ashdown become a Companion of Honour. At 8:45, the FTSE 100 was down 17 at 68.27. And LBC weather, a dry and sunny day for London and the South East today. Highs of 21 degrees. Similar picture for much of the country. Cloudy for Wales and Northern Ireland, though, with patchy rain expected. Low cloud lifting for Scotland to allow sunny intervals to develop. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Lisa Aziz.
In an independent taste test with 400 people for Lidl's cola bottle sweets and the big brand's Haribo, you preferred Lidl's Own, especially when you got to the till. Because per 100 grams Haribo is 95p and Lidl's Own is only 33p. So with more than a 60% saving, isn't it time you shopped a little smarter? Visit your local Lidl or shop a littlesmarter.co.uk to find out more and see the savings you could make. 61% preferred Lidl's versus 29% competitor. Lowest competitor price on mysupermarket.co.uk 18th of June.
I'm Chris Golds in the LBC Travel Centre on the M25 clockwise. Still a bit of a struggle this morning. It's after a breakdown earlier between Clackett Lane Services and Junction 6 for Godstone. In Streatham, the A23 Streatham High Road, that's queuing this morning. Partially blocked because of an accident northbound at Hopton Road. It's causing delays back to Green Lane. In Dagenham, the A13 heading into London, that's slow at the moment between Dagenham and the Lodge Avenue flyover embarking. Not helped by an accident earlier near the Ripple Road junction. Greenwich and the Blackwall Tunnel, the northbound approach is very slow this morning from the Woolwich Road flyover. And Bow heading into London, that's slow along the A11 Bow Road, heading into town between Bow Church and Mile End Tube Station, and then again through Whitechapel through to Aldgate. That's all because of roadworks. On the tubes this morning, the District Line, severe delays west of Earls Court after a signal failure, and mine delays east of Earls Court. Keeping London moving, this is LBC.
LBC Travel.
With Citrix Go-To Meeting, bringing your clients closer to your business.
This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation, with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Good morning to you. It's 9:05 and it's Thursday and it's called... Well, it's not called Clegg. It's Hear from Nick Clegg, the Lib Dem leader and former Deputy Prime Minister. In his first broadcast interview, Nick Clegg is in the studio with me now. Thank you for coming in, Mr. Clegg. What have you been up to?
Well, I'll tell you what you've been up to while I've been away. Look at these swanky studios.
This is the Nick Clegg Memorial Studio.
I sort of depart from the stage and you invest.
Can I tell you, the Prime Minister came in, saw all of this, says, quick as any, and I said this was done, Nick Clegg, and the Prime Minister says, quick as this, well, he always was good spending other people's money.
No. You said this was before Nick.
You went down this path.
You make it sound like a mausoleum. Actually, I'm here partly about money to pay you back.
Yes, indeed.
£50, because
yes.
you did bet me on air that...
That's the 50 I gave you.
Yeah, but, God, you're not going to double it up, are you?
Yeah, well, normally a £50 wager.
Yeah, well, I'm just giving you back your money.
Let's just have the audio, Mr. Clegg. But I'd love to have a €50 or a £50 wager with you that this will be the last election call, Clegg. Are you prepared to take the chance that you will be returning as Deputy Prime Minister?
£50 is worth more than €50. So, I want to take more of your money off you. Yes. So, do it in pounds.
You'll take £50 that you'll be returning as Deputy Prime Minister. So we have a £50 bet.
We have a £50 bet.
I'll give you that 50.
There we go, we shake on it.
Right, so I got my steak back.
Yeah. No, OK, all right. Well, the second instalment is...
OK, we look forward to it.
I still have it in
You're
my
an honourable
man.
Right, not much laughter about that night in May. Where were you, Mr. Clegg?
I was in Sheffield. Absolutely disastrous result.
It's 10 o'clock at night.
Yes.
I presume you're watching TV. Well, let's back up a little. What were you picking up from your people in the field?
So we definitely knew... it was funny, actually. It was an odd campaign. I've never experienced anything like it, because the beginning of the campaign felt like it was shaping up to be quite a traditional right-left argument. You know, is Labour going to mess up the economy? Are the Tories going to be beastly to the vulnerable? And to which at least we were a plausible centre-ground alternative. And then... I can't quite pinpoint it, but maybe 10 days or so around, before Election Day, all of us really felt that this seeping fear in England of a Labour government dancing to the tune of the SNP really sort of chilled the English heart. And you really could see lots and lots of people who traditionally would have voted for the Liberal Democrats basically playing it safe and saying, no, that's one thing we absolutely don't want, and the best guarantee against that was for them to vote Conservative, even if they maybe hadn't voted Conservative before. And we certainly felt that was shifting in that direction. Did I think it was going to happen on the scale? Of course not. Did anyone? No. I mean,
what were you getting from your? Were you thinking you might have 20 seats, 30?
I don't have a precise number, but certainly not 8. Not in
because you said to me.
Fears. But by the way, I think everybody got it right. Everyone from the pollsters to the Conservatives clearly didn't expect to win at all, which is why they're a sort of slightly. How can I put it? A slightly sort of accidental, much more accidental and brittle government now than they would like to pretend. I think.
So it's 10 p.m. on election night, and I bear in mind that children could be listening. You see the results of that poll. What's the first thing you say? Who's with you, by the way?
First thing I do is reach for a cigarette, not having smoked for about 2.5 months. I have stopped again, by the way, so don't worry. Sanity has been restored. But no, I was like.
Who had the cigarettes?
Well, they were. I left a pack rather helpfully up in my flat in Sheffield. Look, can we just not talk about my smoke? I know I raised it. I feel one of the luxuries I have in my new disposition is that...
Was Miriam with you?
Miriam and I... So, to be more serious, Miriam and I were together in Sheffield, and, like everybody else, I was pretty blindsided by that exit poll, and the rest, as you know, is history.
Did you believe it?
No. I mean, initially, like everybody else, I thought that just can't be right. But I did instantly think to myself, even if we get twice as many as that exit poll says, it's still it's still a much worse night than I could have hoped for. So I pretty instantly knew, because exit polls. I mean, look, I'm not a pollster, but you hear all these pollsters now spending all their time sort of analysing why they got it so wrong. But an exit poll is quite different to a normal poll, because it's people just telling folk what they've just done in the ballot box. So,
what did Miriam say to you?
Well, look, we just we just have to sort of absorb the news, and very quickly, my mind turned to the fact that I wanted to know, of course, whether I had held my own seat or not, and so that was my immediate focus. And I'm absolutely delighted after a very kind of intense and hard fight in Sheffield Hallam that I've been re-elected as MP for the area. But then very quickly, of course, I knew that I should take responsibility.
Yeah.
You should in any.
Did you have a stiff drink?
No, I didn't. No, I don't sort of.
No,
I don't.
Cigarette.
I don't turn to the bottle at moments like that.
And then you must worry about your close colleagues, because you've got to think, I'm going to lose buddies here.
Yes, which is, of course, exactly what has happened, and it's a very cruel thing. Politics is a rough business. It's a very cruel thing to see.
For whom did you feel most sorry?
Oh, I don't think it doesn't work like that, Nick. You don't sort of sit there having a sort of league table of people you feel most upset about. But I remember speaking to obviously both Danny Alexander and David Laws, who are not only close colleagues of mine but are very close friends of mine. And I can't think of two better public servants for the country than Danny and David. They worked their socks off for 5 years for the country, and like the rest of the Liberal Democrat team, we put country before party, and I think in a way that has been good for the country, but clearly bad for the. I mean, the danger now is we go into reverse. We have a government which puts party before country. I very much hope that the Conservatives don't do that.
So who was the first political ally you spoke with after 10 o'clock?
I can't remember. It was either Danny or David, one of the two. Yeah.
And what did you both say? Head in hands time?
I mean, I don't sort of relive these moments sort of in such microscopic detail. We were obviously, blindsided by it completely.
Did you speak with Paddy?
I spoke to Paddy during the course of the evening, and various other.
Now he said he'd eat his hat. Of course, famously, he'd eat his hat if it.
He did.
Hasn't eaten his hat.
Didn't someone present him with a marzipan?
Yeah, he did get a hat.
I hope he likes marzipan. I must ask him. Actually, I saw him yesterday. I couldn't ask him whether he's worked his way through his marzipan hat.
Was it still a state of disbelief for a while?
I think initially, but that gave way very quickly to a grim realisation that this was going to be an absolutely terrible night. That all the predictions and expectations were wildly wrong. I mean, it's an extraordinary election if you consider that.
What's your view of the polling?
The Conservative High Command didn't think they were going to win. The Labour High Command appeared to think they were going to win. We thought we were going to do. I mean, look, if you look. In the grand scheme of things, we clearly the Liberal Democrats, that is, went into this election campaign on the back foot already, for all the obvious reasons. 5 years of taking very difficult decisions to put the country, back on track after the economic disasters of the past. The controversy of entering into a coalition, the controversies of the decisions we took. So we're already entering into the campaign period on the back foot. We actually ran, I'm sure people readily forget this, but we actually ran, in my view, a very professional, optimistic, dynamic, energetic
Mr.
campaign.
Clegg.
But hang on a minute.
It was a wipeout.
No, what I'm saying is the campaign, I'm talking about the campaign. So we went into the campaign on the back foot. But what really did transform things, of course, is this astonishing clean sweep for Scottish nationalism north of the border. And with hindsight, 20% of the Liberal Democrat Parliamentary Party was, in a sense, doomed before the starting gun had even been fired. And then, of course, that elicited this very powerful reaction south of the border, and we were just not in a position to withstand that pincer movement, if I can put it that way.
Knowing now what you did not know then, how much do you regret going into coalition?
I don't regret at all, not for 1 millisecond, doing the right thing for the country.
You've destroyed your party.
No, I haven't destroyed the party. The Liberalism will survive. The Liberal Democrats will bounce back.
It's at a shocking low.
Well, it's at a real low. But
Probably an all-time low.
Listen, if we're now going to get to a state in politics where politicians should only ever do something when they get out a sort of pocket calculator to work out whether it's right for their own personal party advantage, I think politics will be a much poorer vocation.
So what persuades you it was the right decision? How has you changed Britain? What were the things that you've done that you can hang your hat on and think, well, yes, my party is in a bad position, but...
Well, for starters, the country was teetering on the edge of an economic precipice back in 2010, and without the kind of courageous decision of the Liberal Democrats to help create a stable... Look, we had a stable, strong, sane government anchored in the centre ground for 5 years at a time of outright economic peril. And I'm incredibly proud, as are, by the way, the vast majority of Liberal Democrats. We've had 20,000 new members join the Liberal Democrats since the beginning of the election campaign.
What do you put that down to?
Well, a lot of them say, and that's the point I want to make to you, is because they actually take pride. They take pride in the fact that the Liberal Democrats did the right thing by the country, and they think that that hasn't been properly recognised, and they now want to join the party. So a third of the Liberal Democrat membership is now new, very new, over the last several weeks. That tells me that there are people out there who believe that, whilst of course the judgment in the ballot box was incredibly cruel, it was right to do to provide that service to the country, to provide the stability to the country at the time. And you ask for what did we do? I mean, look, I'm immensely proud of the fact. One of the proudest moments, you might find this a bit quirky, but one of my proudest moments in government was, oddly enough, it sounds a bit robotic this, but it was when a set of statistics were produced. It was quite recent. It was about November, December last year, they were official statistics, showing that for the first time in a very long time, the so-called attainment gap, that's jargon for the educational performance of kids from poorer backgrounds compared to kids from richer backgrounds, was closing for the first time in ages. And it was clear that the reason that was happening was because of policies that had only been introduced in our schools by Liberal Democrats. The pupil premium, something I first wrote about over a decade ago, targeting money at kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, putting more money into childcare and early years education for kids from the poorest background. That makes me immensely proud. Why? Because, like all liberals, I believe, above and beyond everything else, that the reason we are in politics is to make sure that people have got the fairest crack at the whip and that you have genuine social mobility, that people can live out their dreams regardless of the circumstances of their birth. That is a fantastic thing. And that no one can take that away from us. No. In the same way they can't take away Steve Webb's pension reforms, Vince Cable's reforms on the apprenticeship, Danny Alexander taking millions of people out of paying income tax. These are things which will stand the test of time. My fear, obviously, is that, and you can see it already, the Conservatives now reinventing how you measure child poverty, cutting money for schools and colleges, that a lot of that work, that centre ground work, will now be undone.
What did David Cameron say to you when you first spoke with him after the result?
So, in a spectacular example of the way in which the British establishment can sort of create awkward moments for politicians in the immediate aftermath of an election, Ed Miliband, David Cameron and I had to line up in front of the world at the Cenotaph. And so we briefly spoke then. I mean, look, we didn't...
What was his mood towards you?
I don't know, you ask him. I mean...
Well, what did you take from it? Was he triumphant?
Look, I think he was. I think my impression. But you ask them. Listen, I'm not here to speak. I get the impression that they were pretty much as we were blindsided by the result. They were pretty gobsmacked to find themselves elected with an outright majority.
And how was Mr. Miliband? How did he appear at that cenotaph?
I mean, look, I think it was all so fresh. I think everyone was just, in a sense, going through the ceremony, going through the various stages of that ceremony, and trying to do so in as dignified a way as possible.
What do you miss about being Deputy Prime Minister?
Oh, I miss taking decisions which I think help make the country the kind of country that I want my kids to live in. A safe country, but also a fairer country. And it's only been 6 weeks since the election. I already see a lot of decisions which are squandering rather than building on what we did. Well, the thing I mentioned earlier is a very good example. The Conservatives are now going to, totally needlessly, by the way, there's no economic rationale for it whatsoever, impose very stringent cuts on the assistance given to some of the most vulnerable families in this country. And they're trying to sort of launder it, airbrush the effects by rewriting how you measure child poverty, something, by the way, which they wanted to do in coalition government, and I said was not acceptable, which of course it isn't. It's not acceptable to suddenly change the goalposts to suit your own narrow ends. Now they're going to cut money for schools and colleges. I just don't think you build the kind of liberal society, given that education in particular is the great liberator of each person's potential, by cutting the support that we actually protected while we were in coalition, the money that goes into education and early years.
What's the biggest fight you had with the Prime Minister when you were Deputy Prime Minister?
I mean, we had a fair number.
Well, go on, give us a clue. What was it about?
I don't know. Look, fights. You make it sound a little bit more like play school than it was. It was serious debate. Look, I'm speaking later today in the House of Commons on something where, as you know, there was a really interesting argument of sincerely held, contrasting beliefs about how we make ourselves safe in a digital age. This whole business of the so-called Snoopers Charter. It's actually the first sort of, if you like, I'm going to put it, sort of proper debate that I'm going to participate in, hopefully later today in the House of Commons, and that's I'm not going to start casting aspersions on the Conservatives on that issue, because they sincerely just disagree with my view that you can strike a better balance between liberty and security. So there we argued about that and agreed to disagree.
What's the public reaction been to you since the defeat?
The public reaction has been incredibly generous. I mean, extraordinarily generous. I've had a lot of people who I don't think voted for the Liberal Democrats sort of come up to me and say how sad they think it is that this sort of fate has befallen us. I kind of get the impression that quite a lot of people I speak to, they kind of expected that we were going to get a slap on the wrist. They didn't expect that we'd be thrown to the bottom of the stairs, and they regret that. That's what they say to me. Lots and lots of people do, and people are very generous and very kind. And I think, in an odd kind of way, it's an odd irony. I think the role of the Liberal Democrats as a sensible, moderating, liberal force in the last government is clearer to many people now than it even was in the 5 years, notwithstanding my repeated attempts, not least in studios like this, to try and explain what we were doing. I think in a very, very odd way. I mean, in my resignation speech, it's another good example. I spoke, as I have done on many occasions, about my belief in liberalism and how important it is to sort of protect it, even though, of course, it's under sort of threat now. And I sort of noticed people saying, well, that was great. Why didn't you talk about that before? I mean, I have encyclopedic volumes of speeches I've given on liberalism. What happens, I think, which I totally understand, it's certainly not a criticism, is that sometimes people only really tune in to what you're saying when there is a moment of drama or melodrama, as there clearly was immediately after the election.
You gave that speech and some of your staff were in tears. How did that make you feel?
There are lots of really talented young people who've helped me in my team, and many of them I've worked with for years and years and years before I even became leader. Then when I became leader, then the dramatic events around the 2010 general election, the formation of the coalition, and so on. So these are people I've sort of fought campaigns with and gone through all the ups and considerable downs over several years. So of course there's a huge sense of loyalty amongst us. And
but you look at the back of the room and they're crying. How tough is that?
Well, of course it's.
I mean, my staff would be cheering if I was.
How can I put it? I don't think. I don't think I appeared the picture of chirpy cheerfulness. I wasn't. Look, this is a. I'm like many other people. When adversity hits you and hits you hard, you feel it very keenly. But you have to, But you have to also pick yourself up, dust yourself down.
Should you have quit a year prior to the election?
Should I? Well, I obviously sort of. I obviously would have done if I felt, as I said at the time, that it would have helped the party. But
no, but looking at it now,
I don't. My own view is that changing leader a year before the election wouldn't have made much difference to, for instance, whether we would have been able to withstand Scottish nationalism north of the border and people's fears south of the border about Alex Salmond pulling the strings of an Ed Miliband premiership, which is actually what drove a lot, not all, but drove quite a lot of the last-minute behaviour of how voters decided to cast their votes. I don't think, changing the personnel at the top of the party a year before would have altered that. I mean,
but Paddy Lord Ashdown talked about you having the darkest of dark nights of the soul.
Oh, yeah, no, of course I mean, wouldn't you...
What did Miriam say? Didn't she give it away? It's enough, man.
No. Miriam's always been very supportive, but look, I've always...
It's tearing you in half. You have a tremendous marriage. It's clearly tearing you in half. You're not enjoying it. Why didn't you just say, you don't need it, man?
No, look, can I just correct something? I don't want to sound flippant, because this is not a time to be flippant, but nor do I want to sound sort of perpetually funereal. If you read that, I flicked through it just this morning.
Yes, the Guardian. Page, the Guardian.
It's a good read, but it's incredibly. it's sort of very funereal. It's sort of portraying the last 5 years.
Your party's all but wiped out.
No, hang on a minute. What I'm saying is, it's portraying the journey.
You can hold your meeting in a minibus, literally in a minibus.
It's portraying the journey that Liberal Democrats have been through the last 5 years. If it was just a lurch from one sort of mournful crisis to the next. In fact, there were many, many high points. It's a huge achievement for...
Sorry, high points?
Yes, you bet.
When?
Well, taking over 3 million people out of paying any income tax is a huge high point. Helping poor kids get a good education is a huge high point. Reforming pensions in a way that hasn't happened since the war is a huge high point. Expanding apprenticeships. I mean, look, you may not believe this, but actually politicians do actually also go into power because they want to do things for other people. And on that basis, obviously not electorally, on that basis, the record of the Liberal Democrats is a very, very impressive one in the last government. We now need to rebuild, and Norman or Tim, whoever wins...
Yeah, who should win?
that is a decision for the...
Well, you must have a view.
I'm going to keep my view entirely to myself.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Because I think it's totally inappropriate for me.
Are they both equally equipped?
I think they both be brilliant leaders, and I've known them for years, and they're good friends and colleagues, and I'd be very happy to serve under both.
OK. What sort of brief would you like?
Brief?
What job would you want under the Lib Dems?
Undergarments.
Yeah, what would you want to do?
Look, firstly, I've got a job as an MP for my constituency, which I'm very keen to continue to do, and I'll speak out on things I care about.
Well, what would you want to get involved in? Foreign affairs or Europe?
Yeah.
Yeah, dear. I don't want to go back there. Look at these pictures.
Not going back.
No, but look at these pictures with everybody trying to get...
It is shocking, yeah.
Well, it's more than shocking, isn't it? It's disastrous. It's apocalyptic almost, setting fire to tyres and God knows what else.
I think those
Well,
pictures...
that's a European project working flat out, isn't it?
I don't think it's the only aspect of the European project, but I mean, sorting that out is obviously something we...
So you would be happy to have the Europe brief? Job.
I'm not talking about brief. Look,
well, there's only 8 of you. You're all going to have to work damn hard.
Exactly, and then more than 8 briefs. So there you go. Let Tim and Norman make those decisions. But in terms of the things that I want to continue to speak out on, there are a whole range of things from mental health to Europe to protecting our privacy and civil liberties and so on, which I will continue to speak out on.
How much did you laugh when you saw Vince Cable lose?
I didn't laugh at all. Actually, I'll tell you what. Here's an interesting thing. At the count in Sheffield, so I can't remember what it was, 4 o'clock in the morning, there was a big screen. And there were lots and lots of Labour supporters, as you can imagine, a slightly smaller band of tired but resilient Liberal Democrat supporters. And I was very, very revealing. When the result in Twickenham was screened, there was an absolute, almost sort of unbridled whoop of joy. Guess what? From Labour activists celebrating the fact that a Conservative MP had beaten, as it happens, one of the more sort of left-wing members of the Liberal Democrat family. And I remember thinking at that time how sort of loopy this is, that the Labour Party got itself into a state where it actually enjoyed a Conservative victory.
And how had it managed that? Why were they whooping
well, I
with glee?
I think part of what happened, and I think, to be fair, some of the Labour leadership candidates, I think, have recognised, is the Labour Party, one of the things it got so spectacularly wrong was that it spent all its time over the last decade vilifying the Liberal Democrats and taking its eye off the ball in terms of its own arguments or battle with their principal opponents, the Conservatives. And so what, of course, the Liberal Democrats suffered from is we had all the bile from the right, but we also had this constant, I thought, rather boneheaded bile from the left, who just thought that all they needed to do was kind of vilify people like Vince, and somehow the rest would take care of itself. It was a spectacularly short-sighted approach of the Labour Party.
How mutinous was Vince Cable?
Life's too short to worry about all these things.
But that wasn't like the question, was it? How mutinous was he? Why was he doing all that plotting? Did you not get on?
No, Vince and I get on very well. I mean, I'm not privy to conversations between Vince and Matthew Oakeshott and others. You know, it's not sort of.
Were you surprised that they've been doing all that sort of manoeuvring behind your back?
I, as a general rule, I have many flaws, but I don't bear grudges, and I just think life's too short to start constantly raking over the past and all of these so-called. And anyway, lots of this stuff is written somewhat, hyperbolically and sort of breathlessly.
What do you mean by that?
Well, and all this, people have spent all their life...
Polling being done by Matthew Oakeshott, Vince Cable's wife
Lord
getting
Oakeshott
a telephone call.
I'm not the greatest fans of each other, to put it mildly, but I try and be a generous man, and I think one has to let go of these feelings. Otherwise, everything becomes far too rancorous for far too long.
Can you put your headphones on, Mr. Clegg?
Yes,
There's a couple of people who'd like to speak to you, and these are sort of selected callers, if you will. Liam is in Wembley. You're through to Nick Clegg. Go ahead, Liam.
Hello there. Good morning to both of you.
Hello, Liam.
Good morning. Nick, can I ask two very quick questions? One is a yes or no answer. Do you still receive any police protection?
No.
You don't, thanks. But my main question is to do with, after the election, you lost 49 MPs. Did you personally speak to each of the MPs who lost their seats?
After the election, yes, I either spoke to them or left messages with them. Why, Liam, why are you so interested in that?
No, but was it a case of just leave a message, or did you manage to actually speak to these people?
Some of them I wasn't able to speak to because they were on holiday. Why, Liam? I'm trying to work out why this is such significance to you.
It's I suppose to do with what happened to Charles Kennedy, who obviously was very, very sad what happened to Charles, and he was obviously a leader that took the party to its heights only a few years ago, and to see the 49 MPs lose their seats, it must have been for him particularly an absolutely devastating night. And I really felt, well, obviously what happened then after that was absolutely horrific. And I just thought that when I heard senior Liberal Democrat leaders being interviewed on TV the next morning, it was obvious that people hadn't actually spoken to Charles. Now, there could be many reasons why that had happened or didn't happen, but I would have thought that in your position, it would have been quite easy for you to actually drive around the country to 49 colleagues and actually...
Liam, can I interrupt? Forgive me, I'm going to be a little bit brusque here. I pride myself in reaching out to colleagues at times of victory but also defeat. As it happens, if you must know, but it's none of your business, I was in touch with Charles very shortly after the general election. He was a close friend and colleague of mine, and if you're implying that somehow I or other senior members of the Liberal Democrats did not try and reach out to people who'd suffered from defeat, I totally reject that, and I really
How was Mr. Kennedy?
I find it totally inappropriate of you to imply otherwise.
How was Mr. Kennedy when you spoke with him?
Well, Charles and I, if I couldn't, Charles was, as I said in my tribute to him in the House of Commons, Charles was an inveterate texter. He was always much better at texting than he was at picking up his phone. So I rang him, but couldn't get hold of him on the phone, but we texted each other. And he was actually amazingly sort of, resilient, and I was actually already thinking about how he would play a role in the European referendum campaign. So he was very much looking forward. He was. So, that only makes the tragedy of his death all the greater.
And what do we need to learn about the stresses and strains for some MPs who come from very far away elsewhere in the country and come and live here perhaps as young men and then can sometimes fall victim to some of the temptations, whether it be alcohol or whatever? What do we need to learn?
I'm not sure if one can reduce alcoholism, which is a condition which needs to be treated, to the fact that people are sort of travelling long distances. I think the roots of alcoholism are often deeper than that, and I suspect they were in Charles's case. But I think in an odd way, it's awful that a tragedy like Charles's death has in a sense been the catalyst for this. But I think really appreciating quite what a intractable condition alcoholism is. And often how people who suffer from alcoholism find it quite difficult to reach out and ask for help, even from their closest friends. I think the fact that there is a greater public awareness of that now is in some ways perhaps a good thing for those who will encounter that condition in the future.
You very kindly agreed to stay for a couple more minutes with me after the news. Coming up after the news, we've been speaking, Mr. Clegg, to senior politicians who had some questions and views for you.
I think history will judge Nick Clegg very favourably indeed.
That's Boris Johnson, but how's Nick Clegg react to Boris Johnson's reaction? That's after this. LBC News 9:32, Lisa Aziz.
In his first interview since his party lost 49 seats at the general election, Nick Clegg's told LBC he has no regrets about entering coalition with the Conservatives.
I don't regret at all, not for 1 millisecond, doing the right thing for the country.
You've destroyed your party?
No, I haven't destroyed the party. Liberalism will survive. The Liberal Democrats will bounce back.
The former Deputy Prime Minister also says he didn't believe the exit poll when it came out on election night.
I mean, initially, like everybody else, I thought that just can't be right. But I did instantly think to myself, even if we get twice as many as that exit poll says, it's still a much worse night than I could have hoped for.
You can watch Nick Clegg's full interview on lbc.co.uk. In other news this morning, record levels of violence against women and girls are being recorded in England and Wales. The Crown Prosecution Service says there's been an 18% rise in convictions in the past year. British Transport Police are investigating after 2 people had a substance reported to be acid thrown over them on a London Overground train. The pair were taken to hospital after the attack last night at South Tottenham Station. At 9:15, the FTSE 100 was down 13 at 68.31, and LBC weather, a dry and sunny day for London and the South East. Highs today of 21 degrees. Similar picture for much of the country. Cloudy for Wales and Northern Ireland, though, with patchy rain expected. Low cloud lifting for Scotland to allow sunny intervals to develop. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Lisa Aziz.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
So, Boris Johnson speaking warmly of you the other night at the State of London debate. History will judge you well. Are you confident? How confident are you of that?
I think, well, it obviously depends what yardstick you use. If you use the yardstick of the number of MPs returned in the election, clearly this last election can't remotely be described as a success. But I think if you take the wider view about what's right for the country, given where we were in 2010, in the wake of the economic sort of disasters of 2008, I think it's remarkable what we achieved in half a decade to point the country in a better direction. So I think in that sense, in terms of what's right for the country, I think it would be quite difficult for other than those of the most sort of unreasonable turn of mind to judge the Liberal Democrats unfavourably.
Leslie's in Cheam. What would you like to say to Nick Clegg, Leslie?
First of all, thank you for all you've done for us over the last years. I can't remember how long it is since you became leader, to be honest.
Thank you, Leslie. Can we stop there and just dwell on that for a second, Leslie?
I hear a but.
No. I joined the party in 1970, and there've been loads of ups and downs and things, and disappointments, but I don't ever recall feeling as bitter as I did after the election result this year, because I really thought the British electorate had grown up at last about coalition and, parties working together. And to find that, as you defined, people running scared because of the old-style Labour SNP joining together, I was so disappointed. And we lost so many really good people.
We did.
Including my own MP.
Mark, you mean Mark Hunter? You mean Mark? You live in Mark's?
Oh, I live in Cheam.
Cheam. Sorry, they said Cheadle. Sorry, Cheam. Oh, Paul Burstow.
Paul Burstow is your...
Absolutely.
We lost so many good, hard-working, intelligent...
So what's the... I've got to move you to a sort of question or a final point, Leslie, if I might.
It really was just to say,
well
don't
done.
get downhearted. The Liberals and the Lib Dems will be back as strong as we were. It might take a hell of a long time, and it might be after I'm gone, but...
Well, Leslie, I certainly hope it won't be after you've gone. And who knows? I actually think one of the things that's happening in politics is quite how volatile things are. If you just look at this Parliament, it's a very odd Parliament. You've got a government in power when, close to 2/3 of people didn't vote for them. We got 1 million more votes, Leslie, than the SNP, yet we get 8 seats and they get 56. You have the UKIP with 4 million votes with only 1 MP. The whole thing's truly kooky, the way that Parliament is now composed. It's one of the most unrepresentative parliaments. So I think there is quite a lot of volatility, and volatility means that you can go down quite quite quickly, as we have done, but it also means you can bounce back more quickly than many people might assume. So, Leslie, don't assume it's going to be quite the long march that you imply.
In fact, my next caller, Roy, I'm going to put your question for you, but he says what needs to be done about Roy in Brookman's Park word stupid electoral system. That was going to be his question, which you sort of touched on.
Yeah, it's a completely dotty electoral system. You've now got a government in power now, sort of with this great sort of swagger that they've won an election. Yet the vast majority of people didn't vote for them. And as I say, you've got this very odd thing that you've got a nationalist party north of the border that got roughly half the votes in Scotland, yet it's now running, in effect, a one-party state. You've got us we won 2.5 million votes. That's less than the sort of record number of votes we got in 2010, but that's still 2.5 million people putting their faith in us. And all we get is, if it'd been a proportional system, we would have had 51 MPs. Look, we will continue to make the case, of course. What I hope is that over time, one of the larger parties, Labour or the Conservatives, because my experience in government was that you cannot get either the Labour or the Conservative parties to move on things like party funding reform, electoral reform, laws reform and so on, unless they're really, really forced to do so. At every single turn, they try and block progress. I just hope that they will do the right and big thing and say, this cannot carry on. It's just not a representative way to run a representative parliament.
What role will you play in the European referendum?
Well, I'll sort of speak out when I'm asked to. And
what about a leading role?
No. I'm not looking to sort of man the barricades in a leading role. And at the end of the day,
but you feel passionately about it.
Of course I do.
Why wouldn't you want to man the barricades? To use your words?
I will man the barricades, but I'm looking for sort of some formal leadership role. At the end of the day, the Prime Minister is conducting this renegotiation with the European, much of which, of course, is about handling his own party. But at some point, he needs to switch into proper national leadership role and actually make the case to the millions of people who will finally make the decision in the ballot box. And so he and the government need to take a lead. But I will continue to argue not that the European Union is perfect. Boy, it's imperfect, as, by the way, we just discussed, is Westminster and many other political institutions. But I just think it's essential to our economic security and well-being.
Even with events at Calais?
Look, I don't think, actually, fun enough, if you were to suddenly sort of abolish the European Union. The idea that people wouldn't move great distances is why you've seen scenes similar to that on the other side of the planet, in Australia, remember the Vietnamese boat people? That wasn't because of the European Union. You just have moments in history, particularly when there is a lot of conflict, and we've got a huge amount of conflict in parts of Africa and the Middle East, where people start moving very large distances in very large numbers. And, I just, whilst I think there is a European Union aspect to this, and of course it needs to be sorted, because what's happening in Calais is totally unacceptable, I don't think people should somehow imagine that if the European Union did not exist, people would stop trying to, take their life in their hands and travel huge distances from one continent to the next.
On the subject of Europe, it leads us in, of course, to that debate that you did with Nigel Farage last year here on LBC. Nigel Farage has this question for you.
Of course, the real question to ask Nick, which he won't answer, is wouldn't he rather have lost his seat in Sheffield because he finds himself back in the Commons, a diminished party, no longer the leader? I feel a bit sorry for him, actually.
Well, there speaks a man who didn't win his seat. So I somewhat touché. No, I'm absolutely delighted that I'm MP for Sheffield Hallam. It's a wonderful constituency. I've done it for 10 years. I'm delighted to carry on.
Will you do it for another 10 years?
For 10 years? Look, I don't know. I'll take one parliament at a time.
So you're not even saying you'll do it for the next parliament?
No, it's 6 weeks since the general election. So if I may, I'll just take one parliament.
Many people think you want to go and work in Europe in a big, powerful, top job in Europe. How accurate would that be?
I've got absolutely no, certainly not now, I've got absolutely no plans to suddenly sort of disappear in a puff of smoke to some, absolutely not. Look, I'm only 48, I've got bags of energy, a whole bunch of things I believe in. I certainly want to continue to serve my constituents as best as I can, but I also want to help my successor find their feet and keep this government on its toes as well.
We talked about how mutinous Vince Cable has been. How mutinous yeah, well done. How mutinous has Tim Farron been?
Tim is. I don't think Tim has been mutinous.
You've got a chesty cough there. I hope you have stopped smoking. How long did you smoke for?
Look, let's move on from smoking, shall we?
You introduced it, not me.
I have a bit. No, you've just reintroduced it. I took a short break with some friends for a couple of days to southwest France recently, and I went swimming in some beautiful wild rivers.
What's this got to do with your smoking?
No, it's my chest. It's my throat.
Oh, I see.
So that's where I got. So blame the French rivers. Don't blame.
Right. Well, how long were you smoking for? A week?
When?
After the election.
Oh, a very short period of time.
Days.
whatever. Yeah,
weeks.
Why so interesting?
I worry about your health.
That's so kind of you.
Well, that's what I'm here to do.
As I say, blame the French rivers rather than the
Right, you didn't come back through Calais, did you?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
Come back to that's how mutinous Mr. Farron is, though. That was my original point.
That's a nonsensical question. Tim's been a good friend and a colleague to me.
Weeks before the election, he said, Tim, your good friend and colleague, if you believe what really matters is that ministerial car, you will give way to the other side more than you should. We are curating the party of Gladstone. How helpful are those comments?
Look, people say things, you've got to ask them why they say things. I personally think those, and I'm not saying this is what Tim is doing, but those who want to rewrite history or provide a sort of endless wisdom with hindsight, overlook the fact that what you had over the last 5 years in the coalition government is a party, the Liberal Democrats, which had 8% of MPs in the House of Commons, yet played in my view, a heroic role in rescuing the British economy and introducing long-lasting liberal reforms that will stand the test of time. That is a fantastic record. Is this individual decision or that individual episode always done exactly perfectly as everyone would want when they look back on it several years later? Of course not. Of course not. Perfection is not something you find in any walk of life. But do I think the overall record and the overall judgments that we made for the benefit of the country as a whole are good ones and decent ones and done with the interests of the country at heart? Yes, I do believe that, and I remain and will always remain very proud of that.
The Lib Dems that I've come to know, I would describe your party as unique. It is a unique party in the way that it operates. How is the feeling?
What do you mean by unique? That's a word pregnant.
It's just utterly unique.
Meanings.
I think utterly unique. How has the mood been towards you from within the party? How much anger has been shown towards you?
It's very, very positive.
Thank you for wiping the party out, Mr. Clegg.
Look, firstly, the Liberal Democrats take decisions collectively, so everybody knows that when we decided, with the exception of very, very few people, to go into coalition, we did it with our eyes open, knowing that it would be tough, but we did it collectively. It wasn't sort of whimsically decided upon by me while I'm brushing my teeth one morning. That's first point I'd make. Second point I'd make is a third of our party membership is now new. As I say, 20,000 members have joined since the beginning of the campaign, and if you ask them, get them on this show.
How long have you got? Take a while.
If you want to turn LBC into the sort of Liberal Democrat broadcasting corporation, I'd be delighted. We've got a new studio for it.
No, I think we're going one way, you're going the other, actually. We won't dwell on that.
That is really harsh. Serious point, if you talk to the men and women, and by the way, I think 80% of them have never joined a party before, the vast majority of them are young, I think the average age is 35, they will tell you that the main reason they joined is not out of embarrassment or shame about what we achieved, but because of pride of what we did and a genuine belief, one which of course I share, that British liberalism is under pressure. Of course it is, but it is it's a precious set of values which need to be defended, particularly at a time like this.
Let's take another call. Nathaniel's in Farnham. Go ahead, Nathaniel. You're through to Nick Clegg.
Good morning, chaps. So Nick Clegg, question for you. I voted for you back in my first ever general election.
When was that?
2010.
Right.
2010.
Yep.
I was 19 years old.
Yeah.
Now, my problem is I've witnessed, obviously, the last 5 years of government, and I get the distinct feeling that do you feel any responsibility for disenfranchising my entire generation after what you seemed like a beacon of hope back in 2010, and then turn around 5 years later and my entire area has been decimated. There's 1 million people on food banks. Then you sit there and you profess about liberalism. You've made accessibility to education harder for people. You put people into 0-hour contracts and you're making people starve on the streets. How can you sit there and profess liberalism when you're peddling just Tory, Tory, Tory?
Oh, I literally don't know where to start when I disagree with you so much. It's just complete nonsense to somehow say that we have cast people into starvation on the streets, or that we've, cut access to education. We've got more people going to university now than ever before, more disadvantaged kids than going to university than ever before, 2-year-old toddlers who are getting help with childcare for the first time ever. We've expanded apprenticeships on a scale not seen since the Second World War, and all of this, by the way, has been done. It's in case you clearly missed it, Nathaniel, after the biggest economic catastrophe hit our country back in 2008. Not just any old recession, but a total collapse in our economy. Now, look, I just think you and I are going to disagree. You obviously have one take on the world. I have, I think, a slightly more objective one.
Let's balance that. Leslie Ann is in Staines. Leslie Ann, what's happened to you and the Lib Dem party?
Oh, hi both Nicks. So I joined the Lib Dems on the Saturday following the resignation. And
Hooray, Leslie-Anne. So you tell Nick Ferrari what's what. Come on.
So that was really the thing that spurred me on. Now, I openly
What spurred you on?
voting Tory.
Yeah, what was it? What made you reach for the phone or get on the net, however you did it? What actually did that?
I voted Tory because I didn't want Miliband to lead our country. That was my pure objective. And it was tactical, but it was a mistake because I always foresaw, A, a coalition, and B, a liberal voice in British politics. Now, I think the chickens are coming home to roost for us,
That's
frankly.
very much what Mr Clegg's been saying, actually.
With the Snoopers Charter and the proposed removal of the Human Rights Act. And, you know, I live in Staines, but I work in central London, and I always thought that we take our liberalism for granted. You know, we have our diverse society, and I never thought we'd have a political system that didn't actively pursue that. I feel that our liberalism was almost passive.
So what would you like to hear from or put to or ask Mr Clegg, Leslie-Anne?
It was less about asking. What I'd like to say to Nick is actually thank you, because a lot of the things that you did, we took for granted, and we won't see until they are in absentia. I'm actively campaigning out in the Liberal Democrat arena at the moment. I'm supporting...
Having voted Conservative in the election?
Yes,
yeah, that's interesting.
Because I thought it was a tactical decision, Nick. I didn't want Ed Miliband to be our Prime Minister.
Yeah, sure.
Everybody was saying that we were going to get a hung parliament, there was going to be another coalition, and I never foresaw...
What's happened? All right, let's bring Mr Clegg in on this. Thanks, Leslie-Anne.
No, I think Leslie-Anne speaks for quite a lot of people, that because of all sorts of complicated factors, the way the polls worked and obviously got it wrong, the way the media portrayed everything, everyone kind of assumed...
How did the polls get it so wrong?
Well,
what's your view of the polling companies? They cost you votes. You've just heard one there.
Look, I certainly can't remember a general election where polling, sort of day-to-day, sort of thumb-on-the-pulse polling, completely obsessed the public debate. And so politicians like me, to be fair, from all parties, kept saying, please, can't we just wait until the deed is done and people have voted, rather than constantly speculate on what people say to internet pollsters, telephone pollsters. And I think this kind of...
How damaged are the polling companies for the European elections, the London mayoral elections? That's less than a year. How damaged are the companies?
Well, I just hope there's just a bit of modesty now and humility about the wonderful, unpredictable nature of democracy. I mean, democracy is not a democracy if it's not unpredictable. And I think just to speak up for one moment for the political class, and again, it's not a Lib Dem point, whether they're Labour, whether they're SNP, whether they're UKIP, whether they're Tory. Actually, most politicians I speak to, because most politicians who are worth their salt go out and campaign in their communities, understand that lots of people don't make up their minds until very late in the day, understand that lots of people will say one thing to a pollster who rings them up on a rainy Thursday night, but do something else in the ballot box the following Thursday. And so I just think having a bit of respect for giving the public time to make up their minds might be in order after the spectacular failure of the pollsters to get it right. But the point I was going to make about Leslie-Anne was she I think, reflects, in my view, what a lot of people, particularly at the last minute, did, is they basically looked to the Conservatives because they wanted to play it safe. They first wanted to make sure that the economy remained on an even keel, and they secondly didn't want to see Miliband dancing to Alex Salmond's tune in number 10. What they didn't vote for, which is why I think the Conservatives need to be very careful that they don't, in a sense, misinterpret their mandate. They didn't vote for a punitive approach to child poverty or taking money away from our schools or only rewarding the rich. And that's, I think what the Conservatives won, and they won it fair and square. They ran a very effective campaign. They won fair and square, but they won an effective sort of safety-first campaign. They didn't win a mandate to do, I think, a lot of quite illiberal, punitive things, which they appear now to be planning to do.
How disastrous was the Ed Stone?
I think it was just, I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I marvelled at the sort of almost comic genius whoever came up with this great gravestone. But there you go. Look, I've done no doubt daft things in my time as well.
What was the lowest moment in being Deputy Prime Minister?
The lowest moment. Well, the lowest moment is without a doubt that obviously this election. I mean, seeing all of that sort of all that sort of sweat and toil that we put into trying to do. It's imperfectly at times the right thing. Culminate in that election result. Of course, that's a low point.
Was the biggest fight over the Snoopers Charter, as it's known?
Look, I think we had lots of most of the time we had lots of good-tempered, if strongly expressed arguments. That's what you get in coalition.
No slamming of phones.
No.
Oh, come on! I could see the way you said no. I know the answer's yes.
Not really. No.
How often did you slam the phone down on each other?
No, I don't know. I got many failings, and you will no doubt wish to point them out as many as
no,
might. But
smoking.
I'm not a phone slammer.
You're not.
On the whole, I'm not a phone slammer. No.
Right.
I try and remain civil, even if I disagree with people.
Okay, storming out of offices.
No,
slamming doors.
I'm not a
You're not
phone
a stormer outer.
or office stormer outer.
After the European elections, you were red-eyed. Had you been crying?
No, I don't think so. But I don't think
you don't think so. You must remember.
Well, sorry, I don't know. I didn't know. I didn't. But I was tired because I'd been up all night.
And that was a disastrous night as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
All right, we're nearly there. A couple of questions. You're going to play tennis with him again?
No. Not for the time being, anyway.
Is that because he regularly beats you?
No. Next.
Have you had enough?
Next.
Right, well, we come back to the whole premise of this.
Yes, I'll give you the other 50 quid.
Now, the idea of bet, right,
yes,
you have a steak, which was 50 quid, and thank you, I've now got that, for at least the children can eat now.
Well, look, as well as not being a phone slam, I'm clearly not much of a betting man.
Not much of a gambler. All right, it's good to see you. Thank you very much for coming in. Nick Clegg, great seeing you.
Thank you.
Look after yourself, regards to your family. Thank you. Put those cigarettes away. You're listening to LBC, it's 9:53.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
With Hampton by Hilton. A great value stay with hot breakfast and Wi-Fi included.
Boarding for flight 127 has now closed.
I'm sorry, madam, your flight has closed.
Oh, but this is a holiday of a lifetime.
I suggest next time you take a black cab.
Oh, I told you we should have used a real taxi, Brian.
Don't blame me. It was the minicab driver who kept getting lost.
Well, that's an expensive lesson you've both learned. Next, please.
When it really matters, don't take a chance. Only take a licensed black cab.
The camels, the cloudless blue skies, the Red Sea, the Faroes, the golden beaches. For this week only, selected holidays to Egypt are even lower with low-cost holidays. And thousands of other 3-, 4- and 5-star holiday destinations are ridiculously lower this summer. Find out just how low you can go to Egypt at lowcostholidays.com. Egypt, live the magic. Why go high cost when you can all go even lower cost?
You're only one person. So if you want to tell millions of people all the great things about your business instantly, you're going to need a megaphone and be able to travel at the speed of light. Unless we get your customers to do it for you. Reputation.com will gather positive feedback from your happy customers and amplify it. To find out more about how we can help manage, improve and protect your brand's image online, visit Reputation.com.
So it's time to upgrade your TV. But where do you start? Well, with the latest technology, 4K Ultra HD TV. Up to 4 times the resolution. And it's got to be a big name from one of the best, like Sony, Samsung, LG and Panasonic. And you've got to get it from Curry's PC World. Why? Because right now on a huge range of 4K TVs, we'll give you a soundbar worth up to $349 from the same brand, free. Yes, free. At Curry's PC World, we start with you.
Everyone will have a reason for doing Shine. Cancer Research UK's nighttime walking marathon on Saturday the 26th of September. Me? I'm doing it to celebrate my amazing mum getting the cancer all clear. So I want to shout it to everyone from the rooftops. Stop sleep! Sign up now at shinewalk.org. Event rules and entry fee apply.
The perfect summer deserves perfect music. Be transported away by Craig Ogden and Friends. Perfect summer guitar album. Craig Ogden and Friends. Out now at amazon.co.uk.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.